In the science of yoga, we look at the mind as 16 parts, and these 16 parts fall into four major categories. The first one is intellect. You see, intellect is based off of memory. If there's no memory, there's no intellect. And what the intellect does is it dissects. It dissects and it gathers evidence to prove what it has found. Because the intellect is based off of memory, it dissects and searches, and then it gathers this evidence, this evidence that they can then prove to the world what they have found. And that's the function of the intellect. It's based off of memory. Next is identity. Your identity, whatever it is that you identify as, your intellect will then protect that identity. If you see someone who is strongly possessed by an ideology, their intellect will then protect that ideology at all costs because it's strongly rooted in the mind. Identity is strongly rooted in the mind. Whatever you identify with, your intellect will function accordingly. You'll never see someone who identifies with something and their intellect doesn't function according to what they identify with because the intellect protects the identity. Whatever you identify as, your intellect will protect it. They go together. Next is called manas. Manas is a silo of memory, and it contains many different kinds of memory: karmic memory, genetic memory, and so on. Many different kinds of memory that's rooted inside of us. Just as how there are some people who can remember their previous lifetimes, you'll see like documentaries of certain kids who remember their previous lifetime. Some were a World War II pilot and so on, and they can describe it in such meticulous detail and so on. That's because sometimes that memory, when they're born, some of that memory leaks out, and then they begin to remember their previous lives because it's contained in that silo of memory called manas. That's a Sanskrit name. There's no English name for it. So that's a silo of memory that contains many different kinds of memories. The last one is called chitta. Chitta is an intelligence that is unsullied by memory. And the whole practice of yoga is to tap into that, to tap into what is called chitta. And when the meditator taps into chitta, they will have what is called these cosmic downloads, is what I call them. Or you can call them revelations or so on. When you tap into that chitta, you'll begin to have this esoteric knowledge just download into you. You don't even know where it comes from. It just downloads into you. And you'll begin to see things. You'll begin to realize things. Anybody who spiritually seeks will touch that part and will begin to touch that part and have some of that information come. However, somebody who genuinely takes it whole, who really grabs at it and really touches the entirety of that dimension of chitta, then they'll begin to have so many of these downloads, so many of these cosmic downloads, and they'll begin to know certain things. They'll begin to tap into these things and begin to see reality the way it is. You'll begin to see things the way they are. You will have your perceptions corrected. You'll begin to see things just as they are because you're tapping into an intelligence that doesn't have to do with memory. It's an intelligence that's within us. And the whole goal of yoga is to tap into that because that's when the knowledge comes from. You can say it comes from God. I'll put it in a simplistic term. That knowledge comes from God. When you tap into that, you're tapping into the knowledge of God, and you are beginning to be able to grasp certain things you weren't able to grasp before. You're able to grasp the super sensuous, and you're able to see things that you've never saw before, and you have an expanded sense of awareness after you tap into that, and you'll just begin to know certain things. Even the seeker doesn't know exactly how that functions. They just know that in the science of yoga, when you take all your energy and turn inward, only somebody who is called a brahmachari, a celibate, somebody who uses all their energy and turns inward, only that person can truly tap into that chitta in its entirety. And when they tap into that, they'll begin to have all this knowledge come in, and they don't even know where it comes from at all. You can just simply say God, but we don't know exactly where that comes from. But the seeker who taps into that will begin to know certain things that they have never known before, and they don't know where it comes from, how the intelligence functions, but all they know is that when they tap into that, they will just know certain things that they never knew before. They become a vessel for this intelligence, and that intelligence just then pours through them, and they can then share that. But how that chitta works is a mystery, because there are so many mysteries in this universe, and we don't have the answers to all of this. But the individual can still seek and find certain truths that they can then realize certain things and see how certain things in this world function, how certain things in the universe function, how the intelligence behind creation works through them and through others, and they'll be able to realize certain things that they've never realized before. But all information that comes to the seeker, all the information that comes to the seeker that is not based off of memory, it comes through that dimension of intelligence called chitta. So anybody, any sage, any saint, any spiritual seeker who begins to say things that are not based off of proof and evidence, however, there's an integrity to it, it comes from that dimension. It comes through chitta. And that's how all spiritual seekers have this knowledge, have this information. It's not through books, it's not through anything in the material world. It's through this dimension of intelligence that they tap into, and they're able to then share that intelligence. Okay, peace.